Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated, prone to mute button, radio talk show on computers and technology out there. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Ben Crossman, and everyone out there, thank you so much for tuning in. So today on the program, we have a full segment of computer and technology news. We have about 25 different stories, so plenty to talk about and a lot of big announcements. Today was a very, very active day, which you like to hear, when we have news segments. But everyone out there, thank you so much for tuning in. Today on the program, we're going to be doing that, but I also want to draw your attention to computeramerica.com because we just put up our latest review. We had one yesterday. Yesterday we covered the Nanoleaf Aurora lights and the lighting system, and now we are doing the Alienware, bunch of letters, numbers, whatever, but the point is it's an ultra-wide monitor, 31 inches, very, very impressive, and yeah, that review is up and ready to go. I know that it's been out for a little while, but hey, better late than never. And let's face it, a lot of these review sites, they get them and then about 12 hours later they put out their review, not really experiencing what it is to have the monitor for a while. So I wanted to put our thoughts out there, and you can go ahead and find that over at computeramerica.com or find us on social media at Computer America. We also posted all of the reviews there as well. So everyone, once again, thank you so much for tuning in. Let's go ahead and get started with computer and technology news. And that is, of course, brought to you by Computer America. Here we go. So our first story that we're going to do, I think we're going to start with this one. And this should have been the obvious one. I don't know why it took so long. I think they were kind of hoping that they could still somehow pull it off. But really, at the end of the day, this coming from Variety, but I've heard it from a number of sources, and of course the president and organizer of CES 2021 has confirmed it himself today. CES is going to be virtual only, so not canceled. Very clearly not canceled, although we've seen some of these other conventions that, in all honesty, might as well have been canceled. The most recent one was just Comic-Con. That just happened a couple of days ago, like this past weekend. And if you hadn't heard about it, well, there were some major flaws in their advertising campaign. But yeah, they were drawing about 15,000 people on the streams, whereas they would attract tens of thousands of people in person and millions more in people's homes. It was seen as kind of a glorified YouTube live video stream, and unfortunately, this is what I'm worried about with CES as well, is that they say they're going digital only, which makes perfect sense. The show shouldn't happen this is the right call. But when you go digital only, you have companies that are looking to scale back what it is that they do, their presence at the show, the amount of advertising dollars that they're, of course, going to spend, and they may actually prefer to launch their own products in a separate forum, either through their own social media channels, on their own website, not at CES in general. CES is very much known for its in-person presentations, not so much their online presentations there. But there's going to be no meeting in Vegas this coming year. So what I'm worried about isn't so much that they're going to have a virtual stream, because I'm sure that the virtual stream will have as much production as it possibly can. It'll be good. The problem is that companies aren't going to be attracted to the event if it is not an in-person event. So CES can do as good of a job as they possibly can. Companies are still going to back out. They're not going to announce their big announcements. CES in general is the place you go to see what is going to be available in the coming year or the coming years. And in some cases, you will never see things that are debuted at CES because they just don't make it past the investment stage. So this year CES, virtual only, it will undoubtedly be smaller, and we're still going to cover as much as we can, but 2022 is looking like by that time, everyone is hoping that we can all go back to Vegas, and it's going to be the same show that we've always known, but this year is going to be something completely different. So, again, summary of this whole thing, 2021 CES canceled in Vegas. Do not book your flights. It will be hosted online only. And that, again, is coming from the CTA president that puts on and organizes the CES show, as well as the CEO of the company, Gary Shapiro. There you go. So, unfortunate, but we all saw it coming. I'm surprised it took them this long to kind of say that. I actually received a survey saying, would you like to go, that kind of thing. I put in my 2 cents. I said that the whole thing shouldn't happen. I'm not going to say that I made the call, but I contributed to it. So I'm going to take a little bit of credit there. This next story that we're going to cover, story number 1. Story number 2, I did not even hear about this until I heard about some of the fallout that we're also going to cover. But yeah, this just happened about 22 hours ago. Check this one out. Internal source code from 50 high-profile companies, including Microsoft, Disney, Nintendo, they've all been leaked and posted online for people to access. That's right. A Swiss developer has pulled source code from 50 high-profile companies, including Microsoft and Nintendo, and published it in a public online repository in GitLab. And by the way, they have dubbed this thing the Giga Leak. If you are wondering why is source code leaking so important, and let me give you an example of something that just happened a couple of months ago. Counter-Strike Global Offensive. It's a game based on, obviously, Counter-Strike 1.6 back in the mid-2000s. So this game is like 15, 16 years old. And the source code was recently leaked for that. And again, you may be wondering, well, it's a 15-year-old game. I'm sure that they figured out almost everything. When you leak the source code, you get to see exactly how everything is done, and you can, of course, compile your own versions of the software, but more so, you get to see how they detect cheaters, how cheat codes happen. You can design better methods of cheating within video games. And again, this is only for video games. There's a lot here in this recent Giga Leak that isn't video game related, but just, again, to focus on video games for a second, even very, very old, decades old games and their source code being out there leads to a lot of new ways to exploit systems that are still in use. And of course, something like Microsoft, with all of the source code out there, some of it proprietary that only Microsoft employees and their developers are allowed access to. When that's available, well, everyone is now everyone is susceptible to all these practices. So let's go ahead and get to this article. Again, this is from Business Insider. Internal software code from 50 high-profile companies across tech, finance, retail, and other sectors have been leaked online. They said that this was originally reported by Bleeping Computer. A Swiss developer named Tilly Kottmann was able to pull source code from the likes of Microsoft, Nintendo, Disney, Motorola, and others because of insecure DevOps applications. We just talked about DevOps about 2 weeks ago and why it's so important and how remote working is becoming more of a thing. Security is, of course, anytime you let anyone into your system, that's a potential leak, and this seems to be exactly that. So an insecure DevOps application that leave proprietary company information exposed. They posted the code on the online repository GitLab, which anyone can access, tagged under X confidential and proprietary. The developer posted a link to the online repository on the Twitter account, which is pretty funny because Microsoft recently purchased GitHub, where of course I think GitLab though is a competitor to GitLab, but still it's pretty ironic. Now, the leaked Nintendo code especially gained attention from the gaming world, and that's how we learned about it. Many of Nintendo's classic games have had their source code leaked. Now, admittedly, I don't know how much money Nintendo is making off of Mario 64. Yes, that came out like 20 years ago. But using that as an example, they were able to hunt through the source code and find traces of development code. And of course, there's all this other video game stuff that's happening over here. But one fun little fact that came from all of this, from the Giga leak, is that Luigi, yes, Mario's brother, Luigi, was actually in the game files for Nintendo 64. Well, for Mario 64, Super Mario 64. So it was intended to be multiplayer at one point, but was scrapped later on in development, but the files within the code still showed Luigi-type files. So, fun little fact. But making the source code available for public viewing could allow cyber attackers to more easily scrounge for confidential company information, and that is said by one of the cybersecurity experts there. Losing control of the source code on the internet is like handing the blueprints of a bank to robbers. And of course, even if you do that, taking that analogy, even if you lose the blueprints, they know exactly where to drill down, where some of the weak points are in, let's say, the vault. The company can still change them and better secure their code, but the foundations are very, very hard to change. And unless you scrap the entire project whatsoever, or unless you scrap the entire project, there's still going to be vulnerabilities that hackers can exploit. So, very, very interesting. According to Bleeping Computer, Kottmann is responsive to requests from companies to take down their source code. A leak that had previously revealed code from Daimler, the parent company of Mercedes-Benz, is no longer listed on the online repository. But some firms, according to the report, may not even notice their code has been published online. And even when they were made aware, they may not care. So they said that Kottmann was able to pull the code collection off and said to have a lot of fun doing it. He says that I try to do my best to prevent any major things resulting directly from my releases, and their Twitter account reads, probably leaking your source code right now. So he's pretty happy about it. It's impressive the amount of code that they were able to pull. And unfortunately, once the cat is out of the bag, like many other projects on GitLab that are out there, they are continuously backed up and versions of them can be found everywhere. So the genie's out of the bottle. A lot of these games, and we're going to be hearing about the repercussions of this for months and months to come. But it's pretty interesting. That's story number 2. I hope that all of them are able to get everything that they need to, kind of squared away, but here we are. There's story number 2. Story number 3. And just making sure I don't have that other story that I was looking for. Story number 3. Let's do a fun one, and then we're going to deep dive into another article that I really, really want to get to the bottom of. Let's talk about this one. Apple. Apple is known for their quality, but not their affordability. If you pay for Apple, you're getting an Apple product, and you're paying the Apple surcharge. Enter this article that was published like yesterday, and it made the rounds. Might as well get to it. A Thunderbolt 3 cable. If you haven't paid for one recently, if you're not going for the Thunderbolt 3 Pro cable from Apple directly, there are many other cables out there that do the exact same thing for about $30. Enter Apple. And the fact that, hey, if you're paying Apple prices, you're paying Apple prices. The Thunderbolt 3 Pro cable from Apple, it's the official licensed cable, even though there are others out there, $129. That's right. They undoubtedly could have sold this thing for $30. And again, this is for a 6-foot cable. It's not like it's for some heavy duty, crazy long cable, 20, 30, 40 feet. No, it's for a 6-foot cable, braided, so your cat will love chewing on it. That's about the best there can be. Overall, though, it's just a Thunderbolt cable. They said that that sum would get you a Kindle Paperweight, according to the article here. Pretty crazy how expensive this thing is. So how could anyone think it's cheap? At 2 meters long, again about 6 feet, with 40 gigabits per second speeds, the Thunderbolt 3 cable is active rather than passive. On top of that, it's one of the few certified cables that support the full Thunderbolt spec, including DisplayPort and 10 gigabits per second USB-C 3.1 Gen 2. As such, Apple's Thunderbolt cable might actually be the cheapest that has all of the above. I don't know, but still, the market of people that actually need every one of those specs in a single cable is super, super small. And I'm sure that a number of people have purchased this without actually realizing that they don't need all of these features. They said that Apple, being they, said that the cable is ideal if you connect your Mac with Thunderbolt 3 to Thunderbolt 3 devices like the Pro Display XDR, docks, and hard drives. And they said that other Pro Display XDR ships with this exact cable, but Apple has apparently never sold it separately before. That means that for video editors and other pros, it's a no-brainer. For the rest of us, well, $129. There are Thunderbolt 3 cables every day of the week that will certainly get you where you need to go. And yeah, this is certainly not necessary by any means. So be careful before you hit the buy button. Make sure you're buying what you actually need. It's crazy. It's not that crazy, but again, especially if you're not even just Apple, but any customer out there, make sure you are buying the system that you need, not the system that you can afford. In some cases, what you can afford is much more than what you actually need. So there you go. Story number 3. Now, moving on to story number 4. This is a long one, although it's one that we have talked about here on the show before. When it comes to large tech companies, namely Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Apple. They're the main 4, and of course you could throw in a couple others as well, but the main 4, again, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Google, very, very large players. And I would even throw Microsoft in there as well. But each one of them is dominant in their own way, to the point where antitrust investigations, every time that sentence is uttered, the companies like kind of quiver with anticipation, because there's probably a pretty strong case for antitrust and anti-competitive behavior with every single one of these companies. You don't become dominant to the point where you have 80% market share, 90% market share without doing some kind of deceptive practices that are not good for competition. So let's go ahead and talk about this. This article coming from The Verge saying that for decades, the tech industry has skirted scrutiny over mergers, acquisitions, and potential anti-competitive behavior as antitrust crusaders argued their case from the sidelines. But this week, the industry's biggest companies will be forced to confront the evidence head-on. This comes up every now and again in stories such as Microsoft. And most of these examples are going to be in the European Union because the European Union happens to be one of the few places that actually takes these companies to task. But in the EU, you had Microsoft facing anti-competitive behavior when they defaulted with their own browser that you couldn't delete on Microsoft operating systems. So Microsoft operating systems were like 95% of the market share, and that's something that could be looked into as well. But the fact that they had a vast majority of operating systems out there, they were able to immediately elevate their own browser. And I think at the time it was like Edge. It was the Edge browser that was coming under fire here. They were immediately able to make it one of the most popular browsers in the EU. And of course, that was a problem because it didn't really give customers the freedom of choice between Chrome, Firefox, Opera, Safari, so on and so forth. They were taken to task and they had to change the way their operating system worked. Google had to face this when they were promoting their own search results, their own ads, their own products in Google searches. But of course, don't forget that Google still has like 70-80% of the search market. And of course, Chrome has like a 70% market share as well. Apple, of course, has anti-competitive behavior when it comes to proprietary cables and proprietary technology that you have to use X charger or X transfer cable to work with their devices. You know, think like the Lightning connector, for instance, as opposed to just switching over to USB Type-C, which they will do eventually. But until then, Apple was using very anti-competitive cables that you couldn't use anyone else's products on Apple devices, forcing you to purchase directly from Apple. So that's Google, that's Microsoft, there's Facebook, of course, working Facebook with its antitrust when it comes to the amount of data that they shared and the way that they wouldn't allow people to delete or pull their data or transfer data away from Facebook, which was another stipulation of the European Union's data protection laws that they put into place pretty recently. And of course, Amazon is Amazon. I mean, their anti-competitive behavior involves a lot of their cloud services, but yeah. If you notice a theme, it's that these companies are worth hundreds of billions, and in some case, yeah, $1 trillion. They have been allowed to grow super, super massive, and when it comes to protecting what it is that they have built, they are in a position that few, if any, companies in the past have ever been able to defend themselves from this. It's actually quite fascinating. So we come up with these stories every couple of weeks, every couple of months, but nothing is really done. You know, Google is not broken up. Amazon is not forced to spin off different parts of its business. Google protects itself by having Alphabet and having subsidiaries. Actually, I thought of one of Amazon. Amazon just a couple days ago was accused of investing in startups, stealing their technology, stealing their ideas, and then pulling funding from those startups, thereby crushing any kind of potential competition and, yeah, essentially using their influence to head off any competition they might have in the near future. All these companies have something to atone for, and politicians have been turning a blind eye because, first of all, the political climate in the last couple of years has been not very conducive to working together to draft legislation that is this all-encompassing. But past administrations, current administrations are very receptive to how these companies operate. Facebook helps the Trump administration. Obama was very welcoming to Google and what is that they did. I mean, yeah, they have been pumping money into politics to protect themselves, which I'm not surprised at all. So again, let's go ahead and talk about this. This is by McKenna Kelly, and again for The Verge, saying that on July 29th, so tomorrow, lawmakers are set to face the chief executives of the tech industry's four most powerful players: Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google. I'm not sure how Microsoft was able to get out of that, but there you are. Since last June, House lawmakers have been engaged in a sweeping investigation into the technology sector, focusing on whether some of the most notable names in the industry have grown too big and powerful. Over the course of last year, the Antitrust panel of the House Judiciary Committee has led the investigation leading up to the financial CEO showdown on Wednesday. It's hard to imagine a world where you look at a $1.3 trillion company and you say, well, they're still up and coming. Anyone can compete. Have a good idea, patent your idea, market it against a $1.3 trillion company. You're going to be fine. And I've noticed that about guests that have come up here on the show. And really what the point of a tech company is lately. And by lately, I mean over the past couple of years. The point of a tech company is not to make a name. The point of a tech company is not to become the next Uber or become the next Facebook. The point of a tech company is that you take venture capital money, you take investors, tons of money, so that you can kind of elevate yourself above kind of like the non-starters. And then once you have enough money to kind of compete, you sell the company as fast as you can. You try to make a name for yourself. You market aggressively. You try to innovate as fast as you can. And then you draw the attention of one of these big players and you get bought out. Apple has made acquisitions in smart car technology. Intel, for instance, buys up chip manufacturers and 5G players in the 5G market. If you're a tech company, you don't try to take on Google. You try to become part of Google. It's just the way that these tech companies work, because you're never going to actually make any kind of headway when you do that. And in fact, the field actually has thinned out a lot more over the past 10 years when these companies have unfortunately not been brought to task and not made to say, well, maybe we are shoving some of our competitors out by operating at a loss, for instance. Tons of different tactics that they can use to bully out competition. Now, they're saying that at the hearing, evidence from that investigation may finally make its way to the public record. Throughout its year of investigations, the committee has acquired at least 1.3 million documents from the testifying companies, held 5 public hearings, and conducted hundreds of hours of interviews. Facebook and Google have already faced grillings by Congress, but not under these circumstances. Under the chairman's leadership, members of the committee are heading in this week hearing with a huge pile of receipts, leaving little room for executives to avoid uncomfortable line of questioning. I'm sure that a lot of this will be met with "I do not recall," but I've seen these congressional investigations go down. They really don't look for answers to questions. They have questions and they already have the answers, and the people sitting there just kind of have to shake their head and go, yeah, that's what we did. very, very few questions are actually going to be looking for answers here. Now, with that being said, the main purpose of the hearing is for Zuckerberg, Pichai, Amazon's Jeff Bezos, and Apple's Tim Cook to address the evidentiary record that the committee has already prepared over the last 13 months, an intimidating number of documents that no tech CEO has reckoned with since Microsoft's antitrust charges in the 90s. And I guess that's why Microsoft isn't a part of this one. They've already had their moment to answer to the government as to why they aren't a threat to their competitors. So there you go. At the end of the probe, the committee intends to publish a report in the coming months detailing how the executives' respective companies have avoided liability under the current antitrust laws, because those competition rules were never crafted with the tech industry's behavior in mind. That's a big one. Tech in general. It's always fun to hear that people don't know how technology legislation is kind of drafted. Many of the laws that govern new ideas, such as social media, or take for instance Section 230, which was interpreted back in the mid 90s, are even kind of extrapolated ideas from magazines and newspapers back in like the 1920s and 1930s. You're looking at legislation that is over 100 years old, trying to keep up with the accelerated pace of technology. It just doesn't work, and it doesn't work well. So when antitrust comes along, these companies are able to technically skirt, as they say, avoid liability. But the government now has a lot more questions over whether or not these companies should be allowed to do what they're currently doing, because it's not that they're operating illegally. It's just that there are really poorly defined laws. It's not that they broke the rules. It's just that the rules aren't very clear and they don't really apply. So now it's time for us as a country and for the legislators to really take it to the tech company and say, well, you haven't had rules forever. Now it's time to actually get some rules that you can operate by, and it's better for everyone. Saying that the hearing may be particularly rough on Bezos, who is testifying before Congress for the first time. Amazon has been a chief target for tech antitrust scholars for years, and recent evidence has put it in a particularly bad position. Saying that last July, Amazon's Associate General said that the company does not access sales data from sellers. But in April, the Wall Street Journal reported that Amazon employees use independent seller data to guide the development of Amazon's own products. It's really not surprising. So many other companies do that. Like, let's say Apple. Apple is able to look at what are some of the best app developers out there and what apps they are developing. And then, of course, hey, out comes an Apple branded app that has very similar features to some of the best ones on the market. That's not uncommon. And I mean, it might be illegal, but it's not uncommon. So according to the journal, employees allegedly analyzed the sales and profit margins of products like a car trunk organizer sold by a third-party seller before launching its own competing product. It's a good bet that Bezos will be asked about the journal piece specifically and be forced to explain what the company is doing. So to, again, put that entire last paragraph into perspective, what Amazon was doing was that they were looking at the submitted product, because every one of these companies that sells through Amazon has to submit exactly what their product is, a description, what it's made out of, everything down to a T. And then Amazon can see how much they sell it for. They know how much it costs to produce, and Amazon is able to go through their entire product lineup, which is millions of items deep, and say, we could make this for this much and make this much profit and compete with what's already out there. This would be the best place to go. They have access to data that no one else has access to except for Amazon. And there you go. antitrust questions. So, saying that there are sore points for nearly every company appearing, Apple is facing active antitrust inquiries in the US and the EU over its App Store policies. Apple with the App Store, for those of you who don't know, for Android, you can go to any website, download an Android app, and you're good to go. You're not locked in specifically to the Google Play Store. Apple, though, you can only download Apple apps through the Apple App Store. Many have seen this as kind of like a security measure, but let's face it, Apple being able to siphon off 30%, a non-negotiable 30% sale of every single app and every single subscription within its own app store is a darn good way to make some money and make sure that they do this. So that's Apple in particular. And also last month, they told The Verge that the fees Apple charges equate to quote-unquote highway robbery. Google will likely be asked to address its dominance as a search engine, while lawmakers will likely probe Zuckerberg on Facebook's history of troublesome acquisitions, including Instagram, that have largely avoided scrutiny. Yeah, Facebook is not above whenever they see a rival social media company starting to make some progress, they scoop it up and fold it into the Facebook line of products. So while Democrats push the antitrust case, Republicans have their own set of concerns that may try to veer Wednesday's conversation towards content moderation and allegations of bias against conservatives. They also mentioned that they've already filed a criminal referral against Zuckerberg for allegedly making false statements to Congress in past hearings. Companies could also try to make the hearings about Chinese apps like TikTok and how new competition rules could make the U.S. less competitive with products from China. The whole thing with China, TikTok, Huawei, China and the US are heading into rough waters when it comes to technology, and there is a solution, but just know the majority of what's happening in technology in China and the US is political. Most things are political, but this one is definitely political. So there you go. Now, let's see. So skip the quote. Apple, Facebook, and Google did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Amazon declined to comment. So there you have it. And of course, this is all going down Wednesday. I'll be very interested to hear what exactly it is that they say on Capitol Hill. Now, they said that while Wednesday's hearing ends the Judiciary Committee's probe into big tech, it's only the beginning of future regulatory or legislative action. What the executives say during the hearing could provide further evidence, and for experts like a former Facebook employee, they are researching the tech industry at the Harvard Kennedy School. The hearing simply marks the end of the evidence gathering, saying, quote, "This is the starting point. This cannot be the end point, because if it were, I would anticipate nothing happening going forward if this is the end." So there you go. It's now up to legislators. They have the evidence. They have, and they're about to hear from the CEOs to maybe try to put it into context, because that would be the worst thing. Like, the tech industry is so big and so powerful, and really it is innovative because of the way that America's system is set up. Innovation depends on competition. If these tech companies are stifling competition, then they are stifling innovation, and that puts every tech company in a worse position. But at the same time, heavy-handed legislation could make that harder in its own way. It's not just about holding people's feet to fires. It's about putting things into context. And if the Judiciary Committee has anything wrong or anything out of context, this is the time for the CEOs of these companies, these high-profile, very, very well-compensated individuals, It's time for them to sit there in front of legislators and say, here's how it really is, here's how it operates. It's not an indictment, it's not a crime. It's more, we need to change things going forward, and please put them into context. So there you have it. I really, really, really do appreciate that article. Again, McKenna Kelly did a really good job kind of laying that one out there. And big tech tomorrow, all of these different executives, I hope that they have enough time, but this is going to be a very interesting time. Every company in the past, and if you have customers ranging in the billions, not millions, but billions, you're going to ruffle some feathers eventually. You're going to overstep your bounds in some respect, in some regard, in some place around this earth. You're going to do something out of step. I think that tech companies, more so than anything, they don't need they really don't need less legislation to do what they do. They need clearly defined rules. Because again, up until this point, the rules have been largely interpreted from telegraph laws, or from magazine laws, or from cable television laws that were drafted back in the 50s. Things that really don't apply. So I think clear, concise rules are going to be good for the tech industry. We just have to start drafting them and making them. And right now, there's a few very clear winners over how things are currently set up. Gotta get to the bottom of it. There we go. Story number 5. Story number 4. Wow, that took a while. I apologize. Thank you for sticking through with that. Thank you once again for tuning into Computer America. Okay, story number 5. We are now going to go ahead and talk about, let's see, we have a ton of different articles here. I don't feel like jumping right into that one. Intel. They had a recent shakeup with their executives, which I'm all for. Obviously, something isn't working. I'm not sure if it was this particular individual's fault, but something needs to change, and it looks like we have that change. Intel has brought in Dr. Ann Kelleher, who is now in charge of his delayed 7nm CPU project, saying that Chief Engineering Officer Dr. Murthy, not even going to try that, will leave August 3rd. Last week, Intel unveiled that the yields for its CPUs manufacturing on a 7nm process were running a year behind schedule, and now the chipmaker has reshuffled executives in charge, with the Chief of Engineering, who has been leading its research division, leaving the company. Now the push for 7nm and 5nm processes is led by Dr. Ann Kelleher, as the group is being split up under different people who will all report directly to the CEO. Another key change is that Kevin Esfarjani is taking over Kelleher's former responsibility of manufacturing and operations and will lead global manufacturing, blah, blah, blah. Just as the release credits Kelleher with accelerating Intel's ramp-up of 10nm technology, now they will need to do it again for the company to rely on outside fabrication. For those who don't know, TSMC, who makes a lot of different processors for a lot of different companies, including AMD and NVIDIA and so on and so forth, Apple as well, TSMC has come in and picked up some of the slack that Intel is reportedly having. So they're not a long-term customer, as they've stated numerous times, but TSMC is coming to the quote-unquote rescue to help shore up any kind of shortages that Intel may have with its production flow. So TSMC helping Intel out big time, and looks like now Intel is working on, with a new head of the research arm, is now looking to get its 7nm fabrication up and going. Now, With that being said, we have the most diverse portfolio of leadership products in our history, and as a result of our 6 pillars of innovation, much more flexibility in how we build, package, and deliver those products for our customers. That's, of course, directly from the CEO of Intel. Change is going to be good here for them. Yeah, that's all I can say. If something's not working, definitely change it up, and I'm sure that gentleman who was pushed out is going to find another job in the same field. It's a tough process, so it's not surprised with that particular shakeup. So there you go. Okay, story number 5. Story number 6. Let's talk about NASA. This will be a fun breakup. NASA, this one also coming to us from The Verge, saying that their new rover is now off to the races. On July 30th, so 2 days, a 6-wheeled NASA rover the size of an SUV. Which, by the way, just as a complete aside, I think that a lot of people don't realize how big the Mars rover is. Obviously, if you're watching the video portion, you can see an image of it there, and really, they're pretty massive. They're pretty massive. They're about car size. They're about 10 feet long, 9 feet wide, 7 feet tall. And that's just, some of the recent ones. Some of the older ones are even bigger than that. They can get very, very big. Like, a lot of people think that they're like little remote control cars, that they're little maybe 3 foot, 4 foot kind of deal. No, they get big. So with that being said, they'll embark on its journey to Mars, the beginning of a quest to decode the secrets of the red planet. And equipped with a suite of instruments and sophisticated drilling systems, the rover is tasked with answering a question that has, puzzled scientists for centuries. Has Mars ever hosted life? And that's a big question. Obviously, science fiction will have you say yes, of course. But the reality of it is that, hey, did Mars have Earth? There's been a lot of theories about the fact that, maybe Mars was inhabited with bacteria and simple organisms before Earth was, and then massive impacts from Mars actually caused the Earth to be germinated with those living organisms. There has already been conclusive proof that Mars has, not just in its past, had tectonic plates or tectonic movement, but it's also had flowing water. It currently does still have flowing water and ice on its surface. It's very likely. The conditions seem very conducive for life. Obviously, looking at the barren red planet now, you would say, not so much, but it's not too bad, all things considered. So, with that being said, the rover, named Perseverance, is one of NASA's most ambitious planetary missions to date. Not only is the bot designed to analyze Martian rocks for signs of past life, but the rover will also cache dozens of samples to leave somewhere on the Martian surface. These samples will weather the next decade on Mars, awaiting the day when another robotic spacecraft arrives, picks them up, and blasts them off. It's a 2-part. The samples will then travel back to our planet, where eager scientists will be waiting to receive them. That's right, we no longer have to wait for those few Mars rocks that just happen to fall into Earth's orbit and through the atmosphere and don't burn up. No, we're actually going to bring samples directly back from Mars. Very exciting. With that being said, Perseverance is just the first step in a sample return process. If successful, Perseverance will neatly package dozens of samples on the Martian surface that may one day see Earth. This is a really unique, really once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get samples from a known location on Mars. So with that being said, skipping through the article a bit, the article is quite long and yeah, you can definitely check it out. We'll include it in the show notes over at computeramerica.com. But yeah, I think we're going to go ahead and jump all the way here to the end. Perseverance is now days away from a scheduled launch on July 30th at 7:50 a.m. If you are in Cape Canaveral, Florida, you can of course watch this go off, putting Perseverance en route to Mars with a scheduled arrival date around February 2021. Still crazy, even moving at these fast speeds, you're looking at like a 5-month travel time? Huge distances. Now, they said that the central question is there life on other planets? And it really comes down to, is the origination of life some kind of magic spark that happens only incredibly rarely? Or is this something that will be inevitable on a planet? What we can do is go to such a place in our own solar system on Mars and ask the question, is life ubiquitous? And of course, there have been many, many, many theories about asteroids and comets and how a planet is actually seeded with life. This is answering one of those questions. So it's very interesting question to ask. So here we are. Okay. Our next story is about Rite Aid. Yep, we're going from Mars directly into Rite Aid. Your friendly neighborhood spy? Rite Aid used facial recognition in secret across hundreds of its stores. Remember when we were talking about the antitrust investigations with tech companies? Most companies are now some form of tech company. Even if it's something as simple as a rewards program or a membership card for your grocery store, if it's Rite Aid with its facial recognition system that it's doing in secret, there aren't many companies out there that have a big footprint that aren't trying to find some way to turn their foot traffic, their membership into an alternative form of revenue. And I believe that's what we have here. So this is from The Verge. Rite Aid used facial recognition in secret across hundreds of its stores. The drugstore chain used the tech predominantly in low-income and minority neighborhoods. Drugstore chain Rite Aid secretly deployed facial recognition across a network of security cameras in hundreds of locations in the U.S. The company has been doing so for more than 8 years, and it only recently stopped using the technology following a larger industry conversation around facial recognition and grave concern over privacy risk and racial discrimination. Yet, Reuters says that Rite Aid initially defended its use of the facial recognition system as a deterrent against theft and violent crime, having nothing to do with race. The investigation found that not to be entirely true. In areas where people of color, including Black or Latino residents, made up the largest racial or ethnic group, Reuters found that stores were more than 3 times as likely to have the technology. So a couple of things there. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy where you have a Rite Aid that is an area of higher crime rates. Kind of as the zip code, jurisdiction, whatever, in the area, there's more crime. So you put up more security cameras to deter or track crime. And then what you find is that when you look for more crime, petty or otherwise, you suddenly find more crime. So in areas where you don't look for it, you obviously, you don't find it, especially at the rates that that we're talking about. And then, of course, it's this feedback loop that feeds on its, obviously feedback loops feed on themselves, but it's this loop where suddenly you have, again, in this situation, minorities happen to be caught by the system much more often. Now, I want to preface all this by saying Rite Aid can try it all they want. military, police force, police agencies, so many companies out there have tried to get a good, responsive, and accurate facial recognition system off the ground. We have rarely seen one that has anywhere near like lower than 90% failure rate. It's very, very rare that these things happen. And then, of course, with that kind of failure rate, where you're failing 95 out of 100 people are falsely tagged by the system, of course, this is just a headache for, obviously, the ethnicities and minorities that are targeted by these systems. So they're saying that after presenting its findings to the company, Reuters says that Rite Aid issued a new statement, said that it had turned off its cameras. The decision was in part based on a larger industry conversation. Other large tech companies seem to be scaling back or rethinking their efforts. And, well, yeah, they even said it right here in their statement, increasing uncertainty around the technology's utility. So that is just code for it probably doesn't even work. Concerns over the unregulated use of facial recognition in the U.S. In the U.S., both by law enforcement and private companies, has been steadily growing over the last few years. There have even been places like Oakland, California, that have begun banning the use of police using facial recognition, and then IBM says it will no longer develop the technology at all, whereas Amazon and Microsoft said that they are pausing contracts with law enforcement, although they will still be researching it. It's not a perfect technology by any means, but it's something that I would be very, very surprised that everyone completely stops. That's not going to happen. But the use of it, like thinking that it's ready to use right now, kind of walk down the street and you can be identified, trust me, billions of dollars have poured into this, and it's not the best. So a growing concern among activists, artificial intelligence researchers, and lawmakers is that the tech is being sold and used in secret, as in Rite Aid's example. Of particular alarm in Rite Aid's case is that the company used the tech of a vendor, DeepCam, with links to a Chinese firm. Prior to that, Rite Aid used the company called Face First, which until 2017 did not rely on any form of artificial intelligence and as a result, routinely misidentified people. The technology sucks. That is the easiest way to put it. Facial recognition is not good at the one thing it is designed to do. But even with that being said, whereas you may have had a false positive rate of, let's say, 99%, today that may be down to 95 or 93%. And with artificial intelligence, with more and more cameras, with the availability of the data that you need to feed into these systems to get a better read, you're looking at a technology that will rapidly get better. You can look, for example, at optical character recognition software, as well as voice recognition software. That both of them were extremely bad. But then, over the course of training it and it developing over and over again, it eventually inverted, where instead of missing 99 words out of 100, it was getting 99 words correctly out of 100. And suddenly, man, this world could not operate without optical character recognition, without computers being able to scan in words and understand them. The same thing's going to happen with this facial technology. It's going to get better. It sucks right now, but we have to prepare for a world where it is good. It is good enough to detect all of this. So while Rite Aid would not say which stores were using the cameras, Reuters found them at 33 out of 75 Rite Aid locations in New York and Los Angeles from last October to this month. Rite Aid says it informed customers that the cameras were scanning their faces as they walked through the store, but the investigation found that the appropriate signage was missing from at least a third of its locations, making use of the facial recognition cameras. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, do not be surprised if you are out in public and your face is being actively scanned. It probably is not going anywhere. Your image is being added to a database, and the database is then being used to train a system, but the system is still not very good. But expected at this point that if you're on camera, you're probably being scanned and utilized as a data point. Not so much, I am Ben, but you are customer A1Q453 and whatever. And your data points. So with enough data points, all of this is going to make sense. And hey, we're only going to see more of it. So again, I'm looking forward to tomorrow for these antitrust talks. Everyone will be back tomorrow with our cybersecurity expert and all about hacking. Everyone, thank you so much. Scott Schober, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Until next time, have a great day. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.